Welcome back to Tony and Tina's Wedding, Creating a Theater Tribe, the podcast where we raise a glass to the artist, the chaos, and the chosen family that made this show legendary. Tonight's guests help define the soul of the Vitale family.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled about this one. If you've ever felt personally scolded, fed, hugged, or judged at Tony and Tina's wedding, chances are it came from a member of the bride's family. These performers weren't just characters, they were relatives you somehow inherited for the night.
And if you were in the show, you know these roles were iconic. They set the tone for how the audience interacted, how the party moved, and how the room felt. Tonight, we're talking with two originals who helped build that DNA from the very beginning.
Please welcome Susan Varon, the original Mrs. Vitale, matriarch, force of nature, and emotional anchor of the wedding.
And Jay Harran, the original Uncle Louie, storyteller and keeper of the family flame, and the only one who could actually put Tina in her place.
Together, they helped turn a show into a living, breathing family reunion and influenced generations of actors who followed them into these roles.
So kiss your cousin on the cheek.
And make sure there's prosciutto in the ziti.
Because episode 3 starts right now.
Hello, everybody. We have two guests today who are part of the original tribe of Tony and Tina's Wedding. And that's Susan Varon, who created the role of Mrs. Vitale, and Jay Harran, who created the role of Uncle Louie. Thank you both so much for being here.
Happy to be here. Hi, everybody. Hi, Jay.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Lenny.
Susan, maybe if you would talk with us just to catch us up in history. You and I met when we began doing the show at Carmelita's, which was, I think, in 1988 or 87.
If I might interject, we did a couple of engagement parties and events at Carmelita's in 87, maybe even 86.
Yeah, yes, a long time ago. But Susan, you were in the play when Nancy did the play at the American Legion.
Yeah.
Juan and I catered one of those.
Yes.
I was a decorator, by the way. I was doing a show, but came to see it and decorated with Robbie Weiner.
Yes. And it was a very skeletal cast at that time. In fact, we didn't have tables to sit at, which, if you think about the progression of the play, to not have a Vitale table and a Nunzio table, we did not. And it was like, just find a place to sit. And I remember Tom Allen was playing Joey at the time, and I was like, you better sit with me because I cannot do this. It was wild. It was very wild. There wasn't a grandma yet. And there was one performance at the American Legion Hall where at that time, the person playing Mr. Nunzio said, I have another gig to go to. I can't stay for the whole show. And he was a good actor. He was great, but he was like, I have another place to go. And he left the show in the middle of that performance because he had to go. So suddenly we didn't have a Mr. Nunzio either.
Yeah. And did anybody ask you where he went?
If they did, I can't imagine what I said. Probably ask Tony. I don't know. But it was quite shocking. It really was. Yeah.
And fast forward to Carmelita's, and the two performances that we did, one was for, I think it was the night before people got married, John, I forget his last name, but we did the show for him. And then I think we also did it the next day on a Sunday or something. And during that time is when I met Jay and Susan.
And might I just also say that the food was pretty amazing then. That's when we were begging people to come, paying people to come. But we had turkey, we had ham, it was good food. It was amazing food, actually. It really was very different from what it had to evolve into, of course.
And I think that was partially because of whatever that party was.
Yes, yeah. Could be. Yeah.
Wow. And I remember that Joanna Coca, who later became Loretta, was working with Juan and I and catering at that time, sometime around then. That's how Joanna came into the show. But so the history is that then Carmelita's, that's when Uncle Louis became part of the play.
Correct.
Okay, yes.
And Grandma.
And Grandma came during that time.
We
Yeah,
also
so
gained Johnny, did we not?
Johnny. And
Right.
I don't know, because it seems like we always had a Marina.
And I think Sister Albert Maria.
We did have a guitar playing nun who was briefly part of it, but she wasn't Sister Albert Maria. She was a friend. She wasn't a relative or anything like that. That was Elizabeth Herring who brought that. A lot of us named our characters and helped name some of the ancillary characters as well.
Yeah, it was an amazing time. One of the amazing things about that time in terms of the play itself was that it was in two different venues, and Carmelita's, I guess, had a dressing room.
Carmelita did not have a dressing room.
Carmelita upstairs.
Carmelita
up above us.
Areas where people were sewing at machines. There were enormous vats, wooden vats of rice and bags of rice. And when we changed, we all stood there, all of us together, just putting our clothes on and taking them off. There were no dressing rooms at Carmelita's.
Yeah, I never, I was too afraid.
Well, you were getting massages from the Korean massage parlor above us.
Which was also Carmelita owned that, I later found.
That's right.
You know what it was? At that time, it really was guerrilla theater. That's a really fair way to describe it.
So Susan, you and Jay and Nancy and Tom, I think.
And Denise. We had a set up table, Jay, for you and Denise.
The kitchen table became the makeup table.
Yes.
Everybody else was on their own.
Yeah.
In terms of making themselves up, use the bathroom and stuff like that. But the kitchen table had a big mirror, and that's where Juan would work on us.
Yeah. Yeah, and just so that everybody understands is that they wore complete faces of latex.
I don't even think initially we were doing latex. I think we incorporated that from my memory because I looked so rotten in the beginning first pictures with the white spray, and it just was
streaks tips.
It was pretty horrible.
Wait, so Jay, how old were you when you were playing Uncle Louis?
31, 32.
Wow.
Wow. So what was that like?
It was quite a trip.
Yeah, I bet. Digging deep for that.
Very much. But I used a lot of people, not a lot. I had a fantastic guy, Italian guy, whose name was Louis Esposito, who lived on my block. I had a little bit my father, all that. They were European immigrants, so I incorporated a lot of that experience into creating him.
Awesome. How fun.
It was. I just remember telling Larry, I'll try it, Larry. But if I'm not comfortable with this makeup, forget about it. And Larry basically said, it's supposed to be fake. Nobody's going to believe you're old. But it's just to let them know that something's going on. It gives people permission to laugh, all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I have to say that eventually I believe that you fooled many people.
I would agree.
Well, I think I did to some degree. I don't think they thought I was 30, 31, 32, 33, because those were the years that I was doing it. But I know that they thought I was at least 50-something years old. I mean, I had people trying to lick off my old age spots, which I have now naturally, things like that.
Wow. So even down to that detail, I had no idea there was ever latex makeup involved.
Yeah.
That's why Denise and I showed up about an hour and a half to 2 hours before we started the show. But that was really at above Gus's place when we had Vinny's Coliseum. That's my memory of it. We would do things in the apartment, Susan, if I remember correctly, makeup-wise, but you and everybody else who was there, you guys were on your own in getting your makeup on. And we did ours, but it just wasn't as latexy as it ultimately became.
Juan did our hair, but I'm pretty sure there were hair dryers and drying of latex involved in this apartment too. Eventually, it did evolve to that.
It did evolve to that, yeah.
Juan
It was the spray paint on my hair that was pretty rotten, as opposed to the delicate brushing.
But that made a huge difference because you're so close. There's no distance.
Yeah.
And we also kept the bridal gown in our apartment. That's where it was stored. We kept all of the video equipment, the box with the video camera that was here because it was expensive equipment. And I guess Elizabeth Dennehy, I guess they kept the bridesmaids' gowns there because
We did. We just had the bridal gown, if I remember, and yours, of course, your dress.
Yeah.
Elizabeth lived on the other side of Carmelita.
13th.
Very close to Carmelita's, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So at her house, then the other bridesmaids would get ready, the groomsmen. Yeah.
I never knew where the groomsmen actually got. I thought maybe they got dressed in the old station wagon that Mark Nasser had acquired, or Joe Corcoran, but they were like, oh, don't worry about us. We'll just throw our stuff on. I really never saw where they got dressed or undressed ever in those days.
Yeah, and then magically, somehow, everybody would show up at Washington Square Church.
I will say that in those early days, when we went from the church to Carmelita's, we were in the back of a van. You remember we had to crawl in the back of this big covered van and just sit on cloths just for that ride. It was insane because we were hidden, because we had to get there before the audience got there, who were walking happily.
Yes, that's right.
That was dirty and wild and ridiculous, actually, because we're all quite done up.
For listeners who don't know the proximity of the apartments that we're talking about and the church to Carmelita's and all of that, why doesn't someone give us a quick non-New Yorker or non-Tony and Tina's in-person insight into what that looked like?
Back then, Susan and I were roommates, and we were 2 blocks away from the church that we initiated it at. Later on, when we changed churches, we were a little further away. I'd say at least 7 blocks, 8 blocks away. But when we would go from the first church to Carmelita's,
Around the corner.
the church was literally around the corner.
Amazing. And the audience would walk from the ceremony to the reception while you guys were escorted in a terrifying van.
That was rather a walk. It was across town as well as uptown. That was a walk.
Wow.
Because it was like a 20-minute walk to go from Washington Square to 14th and 1st, 14th and...
I think it was between 1st and 2nd or 2nd and 3rd, yeah. And then the audience had to walk up. Oh.
That was one of my favorite parts because I had to climb a staircase that was, I'd say, 40 steps up into the first floor. I enjoyed every second of taking my time because I couldn't move and climb stairs. It was a lot of fun.
What a way to establish your character.
Absolutely. I think the character was already established when I had to go out of the church.
Yeah.
You did
Do my business.
you did some of it to torment Susan too, I think.
Huh?
I think he did some of it to torment Mrs. Vitale or Susan.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because one of my favorite images of Tony and Tina's wedding is whenever we did it, I guess it was in the winter, but is Mrs. Vitale at the end of the show kneeling down on the ground at the table, putting on Uncle Louie's rubbers, boots, and zipping them up.
One of my favorites too. I love tormenting Susan.
I'm sorry. I was asking if you guys were cast at the same time or if one of you got it first and then told the other guy, or how did that happen for you guys?
We weren't cast so much as brought in.
Okay, gotcha. At the same time, you guys joined at the same time?
No, Susan had started before I did, when it was still in its baby stages. And then little by little, other people were added, including my character.
Just to give you an idea, lots of things did evolve, including we got Loretta, Vinny's wife. When we were first starting, Grandma, when she fell during that first dance, she disappeared. She was taken off and Grandma never came back. And then the actress playing Grandma came back in a gorilla costume and did a gorillagram later on in the performance.
Oh my
So
gosh.
in the beginning, Grandma was gone.
How has the gorillagram never come back?
I know, what a choice.
Right.
It was a difficult choice, Gret.
But to get Grandma Nunzio for the whole time
Ugh.
is really.
She was amazing. So just to address this a little bit more, and this goes back to Concetta's question about were you cast? I don't think that anybody was ever cast in the show. Nancy had people specifically that she saw in these roles. And then there began to be a process of conversations and wouldn't it be great to have this character? And then James Altuner, who at the time was playing Dominic, his girlfriend was Elizabeth Herring. And I think that's how she got to the show.
But he started out playing Jimmy the Worm.
Right, but he was playing Dominic. And then like we're talking about Joanna Coca playing Loretta. Also during this time, before Kevin Alexander took over catering, Juan and I were doing the catering.
Right.
And we brought Joanna Coca in to help us cater Tony and Tina's wedding. And then it was like, we need her, so we'll just make her a character. So she became Loretta Black. But it was really kind of this beautiful osmosis of what you needed and who was there and what felt right. But not that there wasn't any real thought put into it, because eventually there would be a decision made, but somebody had to really feel right to be able to be in the play.
And how do you account for feeling right about Uncle Louie?
You've always felt right.
How long between versions did you guys decide collectively or individually that, okay, we need another character, or okay, that character doesn't really work anymore? How often were you like changing the script, as it were, or the characters as they were in those beginning days or years?
Well, there was never a script really, and there was a timeline with beats, but there was never a script. When I went to Philadelphia to do the show, after I did casting, I remember calling Nancy and saying, there's no script. We had to put a script together. I had no script. So this was years into it.
Oh, wow.
That's why the show was really, storytelling is not the right way to talk about it, but each day developed more and more. And I don't think that your questions have answers, Concetta, because we never really thought about that. Nancy was the catalyst to put it together originally. And then when she asked me to direct it, Carmelita's, then the show took a different shape.
I was invited in because at the time I was working, as was Jay and Robbie Weiner, we were working at the information desk at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And we were working with Moira Wilson. And Moira one day said to me, you look like you could be a relative of my friend Nancy. You're not old enough, but you look like you could play her mother. And I was like, okay. So Nancy and I met, and we immediately felt like we were related to each other. And when I first met the original Aunt Rose, Jennifer Heffler, she had heard that I was something about Nancy's mother. So when she first met me, she said, I'm so happy to meet you, thinking I was Nancy's mother. And I was like, I'm not old enough to be Nancy. And she was, I'm sorry. It was all very confusing. But that's how I got invited in. And because Jay was friends with everybody and working, helping an extra hand at the Legion Hall, it was, what could he do? And he could speak Italian. Yeah.
Concetta, what did you end up playing?
Oh, I started as a swing. So I played everybody I was age eligible to play. So I played Nikki Black. I started there. And then I played Tina. I played Connie. I played Donna. I played Marina. I played Terry. And I played Maddie.
And when we were in California, we just happened to have a giant chalkboard. And we called it the Bits Graveyard because we still didn't have a script. And what would happen is as the show would evolve, you do stuff that would happen that night. and it was great. And then you keep doing it and it would evolve into something wonderful or not so funny anymore. So we had a thing called the Bits Graveyard. It was like, all right, no more of that.
That's brilliant. And actually, that's valid today. Like, we should all still be having the Bits Graveyard.
Oh, heck yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I remember that chalkboard. And it was really essential because it was very hard to keep everybody on the same page because there wasn't a script. It was at that time, I guess with the band, it was about 25 people, but so it was 21 characters, but it was getting everybody on the same page nightly because the piece continued to develop until the day the original company left the show. It always was in development. People were always talking about doing something new. It wasn't like, here's a play, let's do it. It just became this force, which was, it really was remarkable.
And only when I re-entered the show about 9 years later to stand by for Jackie and do Aunt Rose, did I have any inkling of 3/4 of the things that were going on in the world. Because when I did Mrs. Vitale, I was not privy to a lot of stuff. Susan was not privy to it. I never knew things I didn't want to know. And if I walked into, as Uncle Louie, if you walked into places you weren't supposed to be, which happened all the time, all the other actors would work around you or lie to you or whatever the stuff was. But I had no idea of a vast majority of things that were going on until I played Rose. So that was very shocking and satisfying at the same time.
And just from my viewpoint here a little bit is that I know that we had a Bits graveyard, but in some ways there also was the other graveyard, which was the graveyard where people would come to me and say, I can't do this. Can we talk about that? I don't know. It was never so much about directing as to negotiating performances to be able to meet together. And that to me was the greatest part of that experience, because as a director, I had to have patience to listen, because Susan might say, I don't want to do that. Or somebody else would say, I want to do that. You didn't really just throw something at an actor. You talked about it and developed it as it moved along. But there was a lot of negotiating to get to that final performance of the original company.
And I have to say, one of the many contributions that Larry brought to us all was a lot of our rehearsals that were setups. So we'd have when the families met or going bowling together. It gave us such an incredible history to recount. And we got to experience the other people and other characters. And that was tremendously helpful to me, particularly. I needed something like that, and it was great.
Yeah, at that apartment on Central Park West that we lived in, Juan and I would prepare everything, and then at 7 o'clock or whenever, it became Mrs. Vitale's house. All of these actors arrived at our apartment in character. What the hell were the neighbors thinking? And then it would last a couple of hours or an hour and a half or whatever, and then people would leave. We would then talk about it maybe the next day or something, but nobody broke character during those rehearsals, and they were beautiful and invaluable.
Absolutely.
And also in the early days when we were at Gus's, there were small playing areas. And so the original company and the early companies that played in that place had this incredible luxury where we could be having moments and scenes that only involved maybe 10 audience members. And audience members around the corner over there had no idea what was going on, because we weren't like bringing attention to it. It was very filmic in a way. And it really helped us to hone stuff that was a basis then when we were playing much larger rooms where it's like, you cannot do that anymore. Now more people have to be brought in and involved. And we had to change that way too.
And to add on to that, I'd venture to say that each character had incredibly special moments with an individual or a few individuals that I know I will never forget. They were so important to the audience member and to Uncle Louie. And really heart-wrenching and beautiful moments of intimacy and confessions and stuff like that. And a couple of psychodramas being played out as well.
Susan, can you talk about the lady that came that said, I know you?
This is a horrible thing because there was a performance where this woman came and she was so into it and she said, this is just like my family and I know these meatballs and I know everything. I know you. I have to call you. I have to call you. And I kept putting her off and she wanted the recipe for the meatballs. And I said, I don't give it out. It's a family. Come on. What's wrong with you? She wanted my phone number and she would not leave me alone. And I kept putting her off. I would do the, what are you from the detective? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, she wouldn't leave me alone. And I gave her my parents' phone number because it was a 516 number, which corresponded with an Elmhurst number because we were all from Elmhurst. Never thinking that I couldn't give her 516-555-5555. She'd know. Anyway, cut to, the woman called my mother. So one day my mother picks up the phone and this woman says, hi, can I speak to Josephine Vitale? And my mother said, oh, I'm sorry, you have the wrong number. Hangs up the phone. The woman calls back, asks again, may I speak to Josephine Vitale? My mother said, I'm sorry, you have the wrong number. And the woman calls again. And she said, there's no Josephine Vitale here. This is the number she gave me. And my mother finally clicked and said, my daughter's an actress and she plays Josephine Vitale. And the woman was crushed. So the whole point was she totally believed. She was told she was being brought to a real wedding. And that's where she thought she was. She wasn't the only one. But that's that story. And my mother was like, how could you do that? And the moral of the story is don't give out somebody's real phone number because, of course, I'm going to call it.
At that time, there was no marquee and people just arrived at the church. There was Jim Hanna who would perform the role of, I guess, a concierge, and he would give them their table number and say, thank you for coming. And then the groomsmen would take over, but there was no marquee. We didn't allow a poster to be present. You could tell somebody that you were going to a real wedding, and eventually most people got it.
There were many just passersby who thought it was a real wedding. There's no reason why they wouldn't.
Or the nuns across the street peeking out, seeing the same thing happen every week from the convent across the street.
Oh, so many memories, so many.
And one of my favorite is the homeless person in the wheelchair that had the little sign that said, I'm a friend of Tony and Tina's too. He was always on that walk between Gus and that church over there.
And then when we were at the church on Christopher Street, Joey, the video guy, would take a break and go to the gay bar across the street, the real gay bar. And they all knew them. Customers knew them and they'd hang out and then they'd come out of the gay bar. We used whatever was at our disposal.
For me personally, one of the best events was because I was so unrecognizable. I would see people that I knew from my childhood who didn't know I was an actor, who didn't know I was in this, who would come and I'd torture them because I'd say, call them by their name. By the way, both in New York and Los Angeles, because I imprint faces. So I remember these people from growing up. And I would refer to them and they'd look at me like, how do you know my name? And I said, what are you talking about? I'm a Luigi from a King's Highway. And I was torturing them. And they would beg me, literally, the wife would beg me, for example, who are you? How do you know my husband? And I'd finally say, tell him Jay Fruchtman says hello. My neighbor, Jay Fruchtman, says hello. You know, that I never broke character, but I would always do something like that.
Those are the golden moments. These moments on the street, as we began talking about this, that walk between places and encountering the audience. I had an actor who I met, I don't even know how I met him or what happened, but he sent me an email about a year ago and he said, as a young person in New York, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was gay and I was trying to figure things out. And he said, one of the things that gave me comfort is that I would wait for Tony and Tina's wedding every day to pass. Those people became my family. They were like a reality to me. So I'm not sure how he got my number or my email or why he wrote that to me, but we encountered all of the people in the audience, but the people that we encountered on that street was an amazing amount of people.
Was that in the very beginning that there would be a 2-venue kind of performance, or did that happen naturally as you booked?
There were always 2 venues.
Always, yeah.
Church and catering hall.
Yeah, the church was, except for a few things, it was very solemn and serious, taken very seriously. Even though a few things obviously that happened were comedic and all that other stuff. Yeah. And then it was really only, I think, with the receiving line when the audience started to come out and go by each character to leave that they began to see what could happen and then the walk over. But the church really felt to me always quite different, very serious. Yeah. If you only went to the church and you didn't go to the reception, I don't think you'd have a clue of what you missed.
Yeah.
Personally.
And the only time there wasn't 2 venues was in Los Angeles, from my memory, because we actually had an outdoor area where we did the ceremony, but it was part of the hotel and the ballroom.
We didn't walk, that's right, didn't walk. It was downtown, in a building that you've seen in every movie that you've ever
Exactly.
watched.
But I will say also the pre-show in LA with the audience coming to be seated there was one of my favorite things for Mrs. Vitale in the whole universe, because it was all nonverbal. But I had something going on with Loretta that told you exactly who we both were right away. It was so much fun. You really could do all kinds of stuff. For instance, what I'm really talking about, this is only in the very beginning, only if you got there really early. And people are starting to be seated, and Joanna Coca as Loretta is all dressed up in every detail, and Mrs. Vitale comes in with Uncle Louie and seats Uncle Louie and situates him, and Mrs. Vitale looks around and realizes that the 2 big things of flowers aren't there. And so I just go over, but I'm not screaming. I go over, and Joanna Coca's Loretta's freaked out, and she runs away, and she comes back dragging like this 80-pound thing. And I'm just watching her do it. And she finally gets one in place until by the time she's done, she's frazzled. And everybody sees it. There's nothing more I had to do. There's nothing more she had to do.
No.
We had all kinds of stuff like that.
And I'm sure Kevin as Vinny is just pointing, it's this way.
Not helping at all. Great.
But I was going to say, and at the very end of the play, in Los Angeles, they drove away in the car. So we got the audience outside, and then didn't they get in the car and drive away?
I didn't see that.
I didn't either.
Right.
No, we were
stuck putting on boots.
Yeah, we were stuck there.
We had to figure out a way to get the audience out because it was over and the audience generally didn't want to leave. So we had them saying, we're going to throw rice or whatever. I guess not throw rice, that's the beginning. which we used to throw rice. Then we had to stop because the
Birds were getting sick. Yeah.
they were eating so much rice because it was happening.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So what we end up doing, throwing birdseed, right? So that
Birdseed.
the birds would...
Oh God. Sunflowers. No,
You mentioned before, Larry, your neighbors at 106th and Central Park West
yes.
were complaining. Do you recall? You wouldn't know because you weren't there, but the amount of complaints we had in Susan and my building was ridiculous. They couldn't wait to throw us out of that building, which we never left. But yeah, I mean, it was a combination of the noise. It was a combination of the foot traffic and the fumes from spraying our hair in the hallway, because we couldn't spray it in the apartment. So we would spray whiten the hair, but also the hairspray for the girls. It was just ridiculous. And we had to continue doing what we wanted to do.
The hairspray.
Yes.
In Tony and Tina's world.
Yeah, the play lived long enough for us to stop using so much hairspray because
the hairstyles changed.
They changed, especially on the Maids of Honor, and Tina, it was really much more natural. So
I remember when I started the show in 2005 at the Edison. They had already been there for quite a few years. There was like a coating on the makeup table surface of hairspray, just permanently there. I couldn't get it off.
Oh my God.
Oh God. That's a whole nother world.
Yeah.
Susan, you performed at the Edison. But
years later, though. Yeah.
Mostly as Rose.
But when we started at Gus's, Rose Keogh almost single-handedly put together dressing rooms. There were rooms with giant metal kitchen things that were defunct and not used, grease everywhere. What they did to put together those dressing rooms that housed 3 shifts of actors, because it was the bridal party and the family, then we would leave, then everybody else, the blacks and everybody, they'd get ready, and then the band would come in. It was military.
I forgot that there were 3 shifts. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah.
It was unbelievable. It really, what they did with that space at Gus's was amazing.
Oh, I remember that space.
Was it Gus's and then the Edison?
Yeah.
So how long were you guys at Gus's over?
Well, I can recall being at Carmelita's and then getting word that we were sold out, but then we had to actually close the show because we were only allowed a limited amount of performances that got extended. Larry, correct me if I'm wrong. We took the crazy chance of closing the show for about a month, hoping we would not lose the momentum that we had created. And we didn't, miraculously. But during that month, that's when we put together Vinnie's Coliseum above Gus's. When you think about it, how miraculous can you close a show that had all this buzz and then reopen and not lose any business? I don't know how we did it.
I think that they just kept marketing, but changed the venue. And I think it was more like 6 weeks that it closed because...
I think you're right. I was afraid to say 6 weeks, but I was about to, yeah.
You know that we all went to Italy.
During that period?
During that period.
Are you sure?
Well...
Because I remember working on the set of Vinnie's Coliseum, helping out, but it must have been when we got back or something like that. Yeah.
Because I think that we were in that space just a few weeks before we opened. Yeah.
And also going back to Carmelita's, we were so excited and thrilled that People magazine was going to do a thing on us, and they were following us around. And we go to Carmelita's, and there's a giant padlock, and we can't get in. Do you remember that, Larry? That was a very shocking afternoon. And Juan was able to make the call, speak in Spanish, get her to open it up sooner. And it just was, it was.
Because, yeah, Carmelita only spoke English when she absolutely wanted money or something, or when she was hungry. Okay, she would say, "I'm hungry." But she and her husband were there, and they were ancient by this time. But one could call her and talk to her. She's Cuban, and they would figure out.
And also, in those early days at Carmelita's, she would book shows or events after Tony and Tina's wedding, and she would start breaking the show down and bussing the tables and taking away everybody's champagne glasses and their stuff before we were
Before
done.
we were done. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Also
I
only
would have
treated about
loved to hear the improv explaining that.
I know.
We'd be yelling at her in character. What are you doing?
seated 75 people. It was a very small venue. We had to move somewhere where we could actually sell enough tickets to be able to make some money. Joe Corcoran did all of that. Some wonderful, crazy times.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is for those of us who joined this crazy train a few years after you guys did, so much of what you're saying remains to this day. Just the ethic and some of the rehearsal strategies and some of the real direction of the show, and I mean that literally, the way it's directed remains. So this is part of what's really cool about this podcast, is that we're going to have new Tony and Tina, some of the people just learning about the show now and doing the show now, and have them reflecting on what it looks like now. And it's so much similar, so much different, but also so much similar. And it's really cool. So unique.
What remains is that the improving while you're getting dressed, while you're getting ready. I think a lot of times people that don't know what improving is or what an improv based show is like, or working on that, how do you work on that? How do you practice that? Being in character throughout is it, right? Is the rehearsal process. Don't break. That's the key.
Right. And also that a lot of things happen by accident.
Yes.
And
yes.
you value that as much as the things that you think you're planning and you want to try.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you guys know that a lot of the food, before we actually had it catered, quote unquote, in Larry's apartment, we would have garbage bags that we filled with the pasta and sauce and shook it up and then brought it in aluminum trays.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
The things that we did,
It just became so immense, so quick.
Wow.
Yeah. Do what you have to do.
do what you have to do.
Our apartment really was shocking at that point.
Mm.
Just as yours was, Susan and Jay.
Yeah, but I loved how you guys just, you had no space and you just made a space wherever you went. You just continued to not only create on stage, you were literally creating off stage as well. And that speaks volumes of you guys as people. But I think that is a similar quality of people that come through the show, that stay with the show, that I've seen. It just creators in general, just making it work, just with a smile on, or just as happily as you can for yourselves and for those around you. And I'm getting chills because we stand on your shoulders. And we came in 20 years after the fact. People now are coming in 40 years after the fact, or close to that. And we're still standing on your shoulders. So thank you for creating such a incredible environment that continues on so strongly today.
It was a lucky confluence of a bunch of different kinds of people that all came together and mixed and matched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And nobody was looking for success. People were looking to work, and people were looking to have fun with people. It was at a time in New York when creativity was high and you could still put together a production for not very much money. But the success of the show, to me, was always secondary. We always focused on the company and the building of the show. And that's why I'm always so adamant about taking the legacy of the actors that I worked with in that original company out to the other companies that I do, because they weren't playing around. It was coming from a place that I think that you understand when you do the show, but it was coming from a place that I never saw before or again, ever. It was just hardworking.
Yeah, and we had a lot of growing pains in the very beginning when we were only doing 2 shows one year or 4 shows another. And I know that Jay could attest to this, that I didn't quite know what it was in the beginning. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue to do it at all, because I did not see myself as an actor who did a lot of improvisation. I did not see myself necessarily as a comic actor. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. But in fact, it gave me pretty much everything that I could stand on for the rest of my life in ways I had no idea would ever happen. So there was a lot of growing pains in the very beginning. There really was. It became an organism that was quite thrilling and fraught, but thrilling.
It was tough because it was good. And you were dealing with people who were really good at what they were doing.
The moment that you guys knew you had something, though, in the beginning? Or was it all of a sudden there was this amazing show that you had worked for years on?
I think we were all shocked, Concetta,
Yeah.
to understand that I personally knew before I joined that it was special. Something was going on that was special. So I was intrigued to join it. But I don't think anybody anticipated the level of success of that show. I don't think you did, Larry. I don't think you did, Susan. I know I didn't.
Peter Felicia's article made
And the Stephen Holden from the Times. He wasn't at the Times then. But all of a sudden we were getting 7-page spreads in magazines and something like that. So it was wild. It was wild. So I think, yeah, when people came out, and there was another magazine at the time called 7 Days, I think.
Yeah, I have.
That's where Stephen Holden was working. When we saw that, I think that's when we realized, oh my God.
They get it. We thought we got it, but that means they get it too. And the only other thing that's just like going through my mind is in the very beginning, in that first church around the corner from this apartment right now where Jay and I were living, and it was a dressing room, we began to see how much we all made each other laugh. We all enjoyed each other so much. I just remember Vinnie Floriani, who was the first photographer, walking. We didn't discuss this. Nobody would say, I'm going to do this. People would just do stuff. And it was a quiet church and everything was happening. And suddenly you heard squeaky shoes, squeaky shoes. And he had peanuts in his pocket that he would crack open.
Yes.
Only at the quiet moments. And then everybody would stop to try to find where the noise was. And then he would stop. Things like that. Things that Kevin Alexander would do that he would just do it for you, Concetta. So once we all saw that we could make each other laugh in a very controlled, respectful environment, I think that's when I knew I where I want to be. I don't have any questions. This is where I want to be. And these are the people I want to work with because they're really good.
Yeah, Vinnie Floriani was extremely underrated. Because I just remember that his first couple of performances in Carmelita as Sal, when a girl would go into the restroom, he'd go over by almost like the door open, he would be looking in. And I said to Juan, I don't know if this is something the actor is doing or if this is something that he's a character. And so eventually I talked to him about it and he was like, yeah, that's part of my character. It was way before you even thought about those things. And I was already at that point, probably my own neuroses, but already on the lookout for those kinds of things, like warning the cast, dance on the outside because Carmelita's floor goes down 6 inches when everybody's
I remember that.
What? I'm sorry.
Let the audience dance in the middle. You guys dance.
Spread it around, please. Balance out the weight.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing growing pains and got this amazing experience and the tradition of being able to continue with people like Concetta and Gret who really respect the work and are there to adhere to it and believe in it and bring the audience in. It's great. Thank you both so much for being here. And ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao. Ci vediamo.
We'd like to welcome you now to our new segment called Pictures for the Album, where we'll be highlighting snapshots of cast stories from over the years and miles. Our first one features Prudence de Benedetto. We hope you enjoy.
Let me set the stage. On the dance floor is Tina, the bride. She has 3 bridesmaids. One is pregnant, and the other 2 aren't. The music goes on, and you hear bye, bye, bye. And Tina and her bridesmaids do a dance they choreographed, and they're dancing, and it's fun. And you look to your right, and there's a chair being stood upon by Nunzio, Tony's father. And he pulls open his button-down shirt and flings it and puts up his cummerbund and starts dancing. That night, my dad was Nunzio. My father, John Di Benedetto, wasn't always Nunzio. He was cast in 1999 in Tony and Tina's Wedding as Sal the photographer. He understudied Nunzio sometimes, and it was a shocker how good he was at Father Mark. And then in 2005, where I'd interview somebody in the field I was going into, so my dad got me to interview Christy, the stage manager. I came in, I followed her around, took copious notes, the whole works, did my presentation, got an A, and thought that was that. But that December, I was asked to be in the show. They needed somebody to play one of Vinny's kids. So I said, sure, why not? I didn't do it very often, only when they needed a fill-in. But it was pretty cool. But what was really cool, I think, came maybe the next summer. And they asked me if I would be assistant stage manager. There were handfuls of shows at times they needed assistant stage manager. I would be the assistant stage manager, or I'd be Vinny's kid. It was pretty sweet. I know if my dad was here, he'd have stories to tell. I don't know most of his stories because, I wasn't there most of the time. But when I was there, it was fun. Watching my dad transform into somebody, making people laugh, telling jokes, was fun. I made friends, I made a family. And it's fun to reminisce about the time I was in an Off-Broadway show. And I was an Off-Broadway stage manager too.
Tony and Tina's Wedding, Creating a Theater Tribe is a production of Virtual Arts. If you like this episode, please make sure to like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us over on Instagram to see photos and archival materials related to the episodes. Please join us next time for our conversation with Chris Fracciola all about Mr. Nunzio.